Hi, I'm Dr. Gemma, and welcome back to Cognitive, the Knitting Psychology podcast. Cheerfully and somewhat irregularly in business since 2008. Segments today may include what's on my hooks, needles, and spindles, a strategy, something I really like, put a lid on it, oh shoot, and blather. So sit back, put your feet up, pick up your knitting, crocheting, spinning, weaving, or dyeing, or any other yarny thing you're doing, and get ready to enjoy. Well, hello there, it's Dr. Gemma, and welcome to episode 182 of the Cognitive Podcast, which I simply must call another fine Mother's Day, because it was for me, and I hope it has been for you in whatever capacity you are experiencing it. And I hope your life is full of springtime happiness and joy. I can't help myself. I feel that way because it's getting dark later now as I sit here in my sunny study. And it's in the high 70s. And of course, there's no humidity here, which is a nice thing, I have to say. And my goodness, I'm just feeling really, really good here in the spring we finally got to. It's been nice, though. We've had a lot of rain and a lot of things are growing like crazy. And if you look in the show notes, you can see some of the flowers that grew like crazy. And my son bought me, for the first time, a bouquet of roses with his own money. I'm very proud of my 18-year-old for doing that. There's a life goal. And my husband bought me some beautiful flowers, and I got lovely cards, one of which looks like a llama, because I'm a llama mama. So it's just been lovely. And I have to wish you all this belatedly, because I realize you're not going to hear this till May 18th. Your comments are always welcome. Please comment on the blog at cognitivepodcast.blogspot.com or over on our group on Ravelry, which I have not checked today, bad me. But I still have some warm thanks. First off to the Knitmore girls who were champs this week. And they were just wonderful. And please, on my behalf, send them all the good vibes and love. Every now and then you get reminded that you have friends in this world and that they're really good people. And this was that week with the Knitmores. Big warm hugs, Gigi and Jasmine. And a Knitmore Sam hug, and a Knitmore Andrew hug as well. Oh, and a Knitmore Genevieve hug, because I did get to see Genevieve. She looks like a teenager. It's scary. I remember talking about her when Jasmine was pregnant. Oh, I hate moments where I sound old. In the meantime, though, give them all a big hug, send them all the vibes and the positive thing, because they are amazing people, believe me. And then there's Karen R.S., who's one of these people who is a faithful fan anyway of the podcast. And today she wins her thanks in the extraordinary service to the podcast department because she listens carefully, oh so carefully, to the things I say. And I'm afraid to admit that I enabled her with the woobles. And so she got some kits. And she sent back some wonderful responses to my ongoing discussion of the virtues of the woobles. And she said when she wrote to them, they didn't offer her the free tin, which horrified me because I did break down and buy Gertrude the llama and somebody or other the bunny because she had a cute little carrot on her hat in the package. Anyway, well, and I got offered the tin again. I gave them a different email so I could get the tin again because I'll take 2 tins. Why not? But Karen called the Woobles people. Let me tell you something. With the Woobles, you get a lot of contact information. They are happy to talk to you. They will chat with you. They will text with you. It is pretty amazing. So she contacted them and she said, where's my free tin? And they said, we'll put it in the mail right now. Meanwhile, she unboxed her Harry Potter Wooble kit. And you may remember last week I said one criticism of that kit from somebody who runs a crocheting blog and is quite good at what she does. She had a criticism. She said the hook was rough and very hard to work with. for her husband, and she tried it out, and it was rough, and they looked at it under special equipment, and it was friction-laden. Well, our own Karen tells us her hook is great. She's not having any problems. So that's nice to know. It just sounds like they had a quality control error there, that they just missed a bad hook. And I guess if you buy hooks from some factory and you get them by the thousands, you may get the occasional bad hook. But our own Karen says, no, if you get a Harry Potter kit, you shouldn't worry. Her hook is just fine. So that one reviewer's problem seems to have been kind of unusual. I want to point out that there are Woobles groups on Facebook. There is a Crocheting for Beginner. It's called something like Crochet Amigurumi for Beginners, parentheses, by the Woobles, close parentheses, where they really just want you to talk about Woobles. People do break the rules all the time there, but it's nice. You can see people's first attempts, which was important to me to get a fix on, like, what do people's first attempts look like. I come into this fairly experienced, and mine came out pretty well, but even I had a few places, like Pierre the Penguin, I had to give him a nose job at one point. And I have had to rip back once or twice, although never more than a row. And so I was really curious. There's also a Woobles BST, which is buy, sell, trade. And it's amazing because those people are hardcore collectors. So they will sell you the Woobles hooks, the special branded one, etc., etc. I'm not into that. But I couldn't figure out what BST was, so I did join the group to find out, and I will probably be leaving it. They also are selling spare kits. I'd be very careful because it is hard to know if those people are actually verified sellers in any way or if they're scamming. But it's there if you want to know about it. And then there's another group called Woobles, I think it's Woobles Alternatives. And they take Woobles patterns and they hack them, which I may have a few things to say about this week. So there's a lot of interesting Woobles activity over there. The other thing I want to say is I have learned some Woobles lessons this week, but I will come back to that because I'm going to tell you right now, the Cognitive Fiber Retreat 10, the link for the information is right at the top under the thank yous, and it will take you to our information thread on Ravelry. I have to say that I think it's highly likely that our group knitting pattern and project will relate to the across the body bags that our own Carmen T from OC makes. She was giving them away for free last year, and she thought it might be good if we had a class on that. I'm not sure about that, but I am thinking of finding a free version of that pattern because they're around and sharing it around and seeing if we can get everybody making granny squares. Because, again, we have scrap yarn. People will be bringing their leftover yarn. And if we have scrap worsted weight that people are getting rid of, that is a fine moment for people to grab that and learn to make granny squares. So I suspect, unless I hear negative stuff from you folks about this, but, last year the common pattern that I brought along was to make the infinity cows out of leftover sock yarn because we were trading mini skeins. Now, I hope we're trading mini skeins again. We're also going to have a yarn trade table for all weights, which we did last time. At the end of it, our own Jasmine scooped it up. This is Jasmine Knitmore, and took it north to give to her class that she was teaching at a local school on how to knit and crochet. So I'm assuming we're going to do all that again. And that means we will have yarn in the place that we can redistribute and we can use for things like this. So we'll have details for that. But if you want to learn how to make a granny square, I suspect we'll be doing that at this CFR 10. And I also think we can learn how to do that across the body bag, which you can do from extremely simple to extremely complex. Meanwhile, stay tuned for the details. So let's find out, shall we, what's on my hooks and needles. Well, okay, I told you, I think last week, that I bought another kit. I bought Pierre the Penguin. I think I got him on Amazon. I'm not sure what got into me. I think after I finished Felix the Fox, I said, Felix is beginner plus. Is there a simpler pattern? There are several simpler patterns. And if you're going to take a complete newbie and introduce them to the Woobles, let me tell you, I would go for the little chick, or I don't remember the chicken's name, Pierre the Penguin, and the bunny is another easy one. You don't have to get it with the hat, with the carrot on it. That's a little extra I added on. But there are a few very simple, very straightforward woobles that don't involve extras like changing color or embroidery. Now, having done Pierre, I sat down and I said, now that I know how to do a wooble, now that I did Felix, let's just do Pierre. And so I went to the site where they give you the instructions, and I immediately got Pierre, and it said download the pattern. I downloaded his pattern, and I sat down with the pattern and I just cranked through it. And I think Pierre, maybe it took me 2.5 hours. I did the orb of the body, and it is the same pattern for many of the woobles, including some of the more sophisticated ones like Harry Potter. And so what I learned this week is there's 2 basic body patterns. One is the orb. The other one is what I think of as the dinosaur, and we'll get back to that. So I did Pierre, and I cranked through them really quickly. I learned a few things, though, that I would say are truths in amigurumi. One is move that stitch marker every round to the first stitch of the next round when you make it. That is going to save you a world of pain because, you're counting your way through a round and then you realize you made a mistake and you have to pull back. And if you only have to rip back to that stitch marker, your life is going to be so much less painful. The second thing I learned was you must count almost every round, in my opinion. So as I'm doing an increase or a decrease round, I am always counting. And when you get to a round that's nothing but single crochet, I'm usually still counting because I'm making sure that I did indeed end up with the right number. But you must expect to count in amigurumi. And amigurumi can get boring and tedious, so I became a fan of just doing one major step per day. And I really enjoyed it, and as you're going to be able to tell in just a second, but you got to take the moving the stitch marker seriously. You've got to take the counting seriously. The other thing is you have to be willing to rip back. And now, since many of us here started as knitters, everybody just screamed and broke into a cold sweat. But remember, in crochet, ripping back is really easy. Much safer. You don't tend to damage the pattern, but that is where your stitch markers count. So let me tell you, when you're crocheting and it tells you to place a marker, just do it. It's an act of faith. Now, the other thing, in the other big category of what I learned, you can see in the second picture of Pierre. The first picture is the finished Pierre. And Pierre, I got things more centered. Things worked out better. I got his nose slightly more to the right than I wanted, his beak. So I took it off and redid it. But I learned something important there too, which is this is amigurumi. When you crochet an amigurumi piece that is 3-dimensional, make sure you turn it right side out. Normally, that will be, the right side will be, you see only V's. On the wrong side, you see V's and crossbars. And in my way of doing it, you will also see the tail of the yarn that you're not using will be hanging off the wrong side. It is possible to make it hang off the right side, but I've never achieved that. So please, as soon as you can, particularly with the tiny body parts, turn those puppies right side out. It matters. The beak and the wings on Pierre the Penguin looked totally wrong, and I realized I had them inside out. And when I turned them right side out, they looked shockingly correct. Now, the other thing you can see in picture number 2, you see the first probably about 10 rows, even more than that, about 12 or 13 rows of the orb that is the main body piece of so many of the woobles. Now, the way she does things, you get to the second to the last row of the orb, it's been decreased, so it's hard to stick your fingers in there, and then she says, put the eyes on. And I sort of stopped and said, after I did Felix, I did that way, and it was much harder. This time I thought about it, and what I did was I went through the pattern and I circled every place where they talked about adding a piece by sewing onto the body or by inserting the eyes. And I got my multicolored safety pin type clips, and I marked every row where things were going to be lined up. So I didn't put the markers necessarily in the exact right place, but I did mark the rows because you've got this orb in your hands and it's almost completely closed and you're squeezing your fingers through the narrow end and you're stuffing it. And then she says, put the eyes in on rows 7 to 8. You're down by row, I think it's 18 is the end of that. And you're trying to reach up. It's very awkward. So what I did was when I got down to the most wide part of the orb, I stopped and I put a clip in to stop it from unraveling. That's the red clip. You can see at the bottom right. And then I went back and I looked through the pattern, and there were the eyes, and it said rows between rows 7 and 8. So you can see I took 2 yellow clips and I actually clipped them through row 7 and through row 8. So you could see that that's where the eyes are going to go. And then I saw that Pierre's nose was going to go right below that. And they tell you between these 2 rows. And so you can see I used orange clips to mark those 2 rows. And then he's got wings on the side. And I used purple clips to mark roughly the rows where I thought the wings were going to go and try to balance it out roughly to be exactly half a sphere apart. There we go. And so you can see now I've gotten this habit when I do these things that I go in as soon as the orb is at its most wide point, and the same is true for the dinosaur-shaped bodies. And I mark everything I can mark with color-coded pins, and I do note down what color represents what. I don't worry about getting them in the exact right place. Now for Pierre's little tummy patch of white, which is a flat white circle that you sew onto him, I didn't worry about that. What I did with that was when I got him finished and I was going to apply the tummy patch, I sewed the beak on first. I think they tell you in the instructions to do the patch first, and I didn't. I put the beak on first, and then I sewed it on and got that nicely centered after I did the nose job. And then I went back and I centered the patch and clipped it with those safety pin clips. So that's the other big thing I learned. Thing number 1, move that safety pin clip always, every row, to the first stitch of the next row. Thing number 2, go in and mark everything before you finish that main body piece. Okay, so meanwhile in progress, let's get on to the stash toss. 25 in versus 35 out, but I have so many projects going right now that when I finish this bunch, I'm going to lose about 20 skeins. So it doesn't look good on the stash toss, but I'm not too worried. Meanwhile, one of my patients got all excited about the woobles without my help this week and said he found this new thing called the woobles, and he thought they were really fun, so he was going to try them. So then he said, I went over to Joann Fabrics and I found this dinosaur, and I said, okay. And he said, I got the last one, and I said, huh. And then I looked in the Woobles book, the Crochet Amigurumi book. I did put this in last week, Woobles Crochet Amigurumi for Every Occasion by Justine Tew. So I went in the book, there's the dinosaur, Fred the dinosaur, and I said, okay. And then I realized they had a special edition of Fred who was pink. Frederica, in my world, I don't think it has to be female if it's pink, but it could be. But anyway, I have plenty of leftover pink acrylic, so you can see that I went to town and I started Fred the dinosaur. I really love Fred. And you can see there's Fred's head lying on the page of the book, and he's a little scary. Fred is not a real beginner. He's kind of a beginner plus or even an intermediate because his head has some considerable shape. If you look at mine, you can see there's a jawbone even. And the eyes are a little scary because the nose is very broad. But anyway, so I did Fred and I immediately did his head and I stopped before the body got wide. And I just went in and I put the eye in and then I stuffed his head. They do tell you to do that, to at least stuff the head. But I put the eye in right away. And I was pretty excited about that. I like Fred a lot. And eventually, if you look at the picture of the 3, it's the bottom one of the 3 Fred pictures. And you can see I added a tail. He does not have a beak. That's Pierre's beak next to him doing double time. But you can also see I clipped where his little arms would go. And I put his tail on. And then in the first picture of Fred, you can see my latest progress where I added his little arms, which are a bit of a joke. They're really just 4 stitches on either side of his body. It's kind of interesting. I guess he's a Tyrannosaurus because he got little teeny arms. Fred, my friend here, still needs tummy stripes, and he needs the spikes down his back, and I think he will be done. But again, I'm just doing one step every day on these things because I have so many of them. The CFR 23, the 5th sock yarn cowl, haven't worked on that. But I also went to work on my Clio fedora, the wide brim fedora. That's surprisingly working quite nicely. I didn't think it was going to. It's a little bit big for me, but when I put a band around it, I will use that to tighten it, which will be easy because it's only in a soft cotton yarn. It's in sugar and cream. The interesting thing is when you turn it to make the brim will turn itself. And when you start doing those increases, it really starts to shape itself. In the beginning, I thought it looked like a yarmulke, and I thought it's never going to work on me. And then it started to work. So we will see. I'm down on the brim. At the brim, when you get to about row 18, you use wiring to strengthen the brim, and that will hold the hat out if all goes well. And then I got mad because I was doing amigurumi and I was doing woobles, and I saw one. I began to really perversely fall in love with Howard the Yeti, which I could have bought, but I didn't, and he sold out. Yes, he's not in the book either, but I looked at the book and realized there's an astronaut with a faceplate that looks shockingly like the mask that is around Howard the Yeti's eyes. So you guessed it. I went into the book and I borrowed the orb shape from in there. It's a koala, but I could have borrowed it from Felix as well, or from Pierre the penguin. And so I did that orb in white, and I did not have the lightish blue, the bluish green, sort of a light teal that they use for the face mask. I went for a darker blue. Probably now I would do it in something slightly lighter, but I thought he should look blue with cold because he's an abominable snowman. So I did his mask. That's tricky because you don't sew the mask on till he is stuffed, till his body is stuffed, because it has to lie correctly on a three-dimensional body. But you do have to put the eyes on right away before you stuff the body. So all I did was, I did what I told you before. I positioned all the pins to mark everything, to mark the mask, the ears, the long arms, the eyes. I marked everything in its cousin, as you can see from the second picture in that section under Howard the Yeti. And then I did make the faceplate, and I did a very good invisible join there at the end to cover it because it looked a little hollowed out at one edge. And I positioned it on, and I figured out how the eyes would be placed. And to do that, I took a picture of the kit off the internet. The best picture I could find. I blew it up and I looked carefully and I counted rows. And that worked great. And so I did manage to put the faceplate on, position the eyes and put them on. I had extra eyes left over from my two kits from Pierre and Felix that I used on Fred the dinosaur. This one I had already bought safety eyes on Amazon for another planned project that I can't even remember. So I used those, and so that worked out. Everything worked out really nicely. And so you can see a picture of him. He is stuffed. And then I decided to add his arms. I had no pattern for the arms. So I took an arms pattern from the book for the koala. And then again, I looked at the picture from the kit and counted rows. And all I did was, I think I added 2 rows of the 6-stitch width that was the normal arm for the koala. And then I did 2 decrease rows. And it worked great. He's got slightly long arms, like he looks like in the kit, like he's kind of ape-like and could walk on his knuckles, so I tried to preserve that. So he's looking good. He is down to, he needs his ears, and then he needs an embroidered sort of smile with his fangs sticking up. In the crochet block experiments, as I record this, I have not yet worked on my granny square across the body bag. It is lovely, though. It is pinned up. I looked at it and realized that's going to go really fast, but it may not happen this evening, but that's okay. Last weekend, I did more than 1 step on it. My rule is 1 step every weekend because, again, I refuse to rush this. I did, however, get real serious about my granny square cardigan, the Lakeside Cardi. I had pinned out and selected and all that 8 blocks for each side that would be the fronts of the sleeves and the top of the front panels. And this weekend I got 1 completely done and all the blocks, everything joined where it belongs on those 2 long strips that I had sewn together last weekend. And then I pinned, as I wear it, that's my right sleeve. I pinned together the left sleeve blocks, and those are mostly sewn together and pretty close to getting sewn in a long strip, 2x4, and then getting sewn onto where they belong on the body of the cardie. It's coming along swimmingly. It's kind of a shock when I look at it because it looks so real all of a sudden. That's very pleasant. Seaming those seams is nothing. I really just put a book on Audible and just sit and listen and seam. The Lydia's Pinks, the socks, I have not touched too much this weekend, but I am on the foot of the second sock. That is coming right along, so I will hopefully get the toe and the heel on it pretty soon and have them finished. Vestuary 24, I did not touch. And then there was the unofficial Wednesday crochet where I looked at it and said, now that I've restarted it, I didn't start over. But once I did the woobles, I got a lot more confidence. And so I did, you may remember, finish the body last weekend. And this time I finished the neck, I put the head on it, and then I went back and I crocheted her dress. The black yarn is running out, but I did use some to make an extra leg, but it wasn't that much. So I would say it looks like this kit comes short of black yarn. However, one of the things that disappointed me when I was crocheting on the skirt of her dress, now you do her body and her legs attached to it like a teddy bear. And then you go back and you pick up some stitches around the waist, and you've marked them already because when you did them in the pattern, you did them through the back loop only, and that makes the front loop project out so you can find it. And it's row 4. So I counted correctly and I found the stitches and I added the skirt, and it was ridiculous. It just didn't look right. It didn't cover the flesh tone on her legs. So I had to add 4 rows to it, and that rather perturbed me. In the pictures, the skirt comes right down to the top of her little knee socks, which seem to be black and white stripes. So I was very disgusted with that. And I looked at the picture and said, yeah, that could be the angle of the shot, that maybe it was meant to be short. But I don't think Wednesday would do that. Wednesday's not into showing her body off. So I had to add to the skirt. So I do feel like I might barely have enough black yarn for the hair. Fortunately, I happen to have some black acrylic yarn of the same weight. And I will tell you, the yarn in this kit is extremely rough and cheap. So I can't do worse. So my black yarn should work just fine. But you can see her, what she has left, let me think. She needs 2 little white bits that will take maybe 3 minutes to crochet each. And you sew them on to be the collar of her dress. And then you sew on a little nose. And all of these are very, very easy. And then you do the hair, which looks pretty complex, but it just looks like something I'll be doing next Saturday. Meanwhile, on to a strategy. Well, this week, one of the things that kept coming up, oddly enough, was the golden rule, which is do unto others as you'd like them to do unto you. And it kept coming back because I had various patients who were very conflicted because, unfortunately, they have what they believe are religious paths that tell them not to follow that rule. And I am not going to preach at anybody, including patients. I don't really bring religion into it unless they ask me to. We do talk about their spiritual path if it is affecting them, because this is their session and I don't judge. But it was a little horrifying in places. And one of the things that kept coming out is, first, I just did a lot of research, and the golden rule exists in, Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, Islam, Buddhism. Everybody's got it. Because why wouldn't you have it? How can you expect people to treat you well if you're not treating them well? People will give you what you put out there. Curiously, the only people who say that explicitly, as far as I know, are the Wiccans, who they call it the rule of 3, and they say you get back on you 3 times what you put out there. So they're more hardcore practical. They're saying, be good for goodness sake, to quote the Christmas Carol. They're saying you will make the world you live in. If you behave a certain way, people will be attracted to you who behave the same way. So you're making the world you live in. I don't think it's quite as mercenary as it might sound in that way they say it in Wicca. I think the Wiccans have a better idea of this than that makes it sound. But, one of the things that comes out in it is You have to look at other people as though they are doing the golden rule. The interesting thing is how many times in therapy you have patients who simply assume people want to hurt them or are out to get them. And we can talk about where that comes from. That's more psychodynamic therapy than Cog B. And yes, I'm sure you have very good reasons for what you believe. We don't blame somebody. For example, if you've been victimized, if all your things are repeatedly stolen because you live in a tough neighborhood, you are going to be suspicious of people. We can't blame people for that. That's called justifiable paranoia. But the interesting thing is if you're going to have peace of mind, you do have to work at assuming that people are doing their best and are trying to live the golden rule in some sense, that they're not coming at you to hurt you, that they want the same things you do. Now, of course, in Buddhism, this is called just like me, and I've talked about it before. But it is interesting because we talk about doing unto other people as we want them to do to us, treating people the way we want to be treated. But it's interesting because we don't do that correlation, that you have to give people some credit. You have to try to believe that they are doing that too. And when people let you down, you also have to do what we call radical acceptance, where sometimes you have people who are just fundamentally very flawed in some significant way. And you can spend your life getting angry at them, or you can look at them and you can say, that's all they got. They don't know any other way to behave. That's the best they can do. And when you say this, of course, people hear you saying, forgive and forget. No, I didn't just say that. Or they hear you say, okay, so they can be jerks, but that's okay because that's all they got, and I didn't say that. But you can't walk around living in a world of what Albert Ellis called shoulding on yourself. You can't say, well, they should do better. They should be fair. You're actually right that most people don't have a lot of excuse. They should know better and they should try to do better. But some people are not going to. And no matter how much you give them a hard time or fight back, they are not going to. That doesn't make them right, but it does mean you have to learn, okay, that is who they are, and you're going to keep that in mind when you deal with them if you must, that you can only let them go so far and you're going to run into this flaw they've got. So to me, though, all of these things go back to doing unto others as you want them to do unto you, treating people the way you want to be treated. But it's not a simple rule. It also involves, do you want them to cut you some slack? Do you want them to try to believe you're doing the best you can? Of course you do. So you are going to have to try to believe that other people are doing the best they can. You have to believe if somebody does something wrong to you, you have to try to remember, have I ever done that same thing? When I did it, did I really mean to be a jerk, or was something else going on and I just was not fully present in the way I should have been at that moment? And that's just like me, of course, from Buddhism. But you do have to remember, when you see people making mistakes, you make mistakes. And you want them to forgive you, you're going to have to learn to forgive them. You don't want to be treated with suspicion. You're going to have to try to not treat other people with suspicion. But if someone continually has a flaw, okay, you need to take that into account. You need to know who they are. And the bigger picture here, if you back away from all this, it sounds very intense when I say it this way, but think about the people you love, because you know their faults, and yet you somehow overlook them. That's the prime example of this, that we all go through life knowing each other's faults and yet still trying to love. And that's really important, that ability to accept someone for the way they are, warts and all, to quote Oliver Cromwell, the leader of Great Britain many, many centuries ago. But the idea is we do have people we do love. And when we love people, we do learn their faults. We do even get hurt by them. And we do continuously enact exactly what I'm saying. The real challenge will be to extend that to the world. So that, to me, was the golden rule. But it's the golden rule with all the other rules that tie into it. So I hope that made sense. Shoot, we're at 190 miles on the Fit Desk odometer. I'm pleased to say 35 minutes a day. And tonight I looked at my progress chart and went, good heavens, I'm in my 5th month of biking every day. I have to tell you, I can tell. I'm so much stronger. I have so much energy. I sleep so much better. I'm not overdoing it, but I'm muscling up in my legs and I am burning fat, although, of course, when you make muscle weighs more than fat, so it's a little hard on the weight thing. I did check my waist measurement. Now, your waist measurement should be half or less of your height. My waist in the last 9 weeks has contracted by 4 inches. Yeah, that is wow, in case you're wondering. That makes a huge difference in my clothing. And my legs are getting thinner, my arms are getting thinner. So I'm pretty happy about that. I am not quite at the ideal waist for my height, but I have hopes. So that all feels good. I think I'm down now 20 pounds, and I'm enjoying that. I seem to be losing a consistent 2 pounds a week, which I should be. In the fluffy books, well, I found the book from Annie's Crochet. This is the larger company, Annie's Crafts, and it's called Spooktacular Crochet. And it's 20 plus beautiful projects for Halloween. I couldn't resist because, now that I'm crocheting a lot, I can just whip out projects much faster with crochet. Unfortunately, these are not exactly the prettiest things, some of them, but there are some worthwhile things in there. This was $10. I got it on Amazon, and I am glad I got it. For one thing, it shows you how to do a teddy bear, which I thought was interesting. It puts the teddy bear in a pumpkin with the top of the pumpkin as a little hat on its head. But there's a lot of interesting patterns that you could use as the basis for somewhat more attractive patterns for the rest of the years. What I did like, they have a lot of little amigurumi toys of Halloween characters, and they've got some pretty nice pillows that I thought would be very, very cute. The cover is not the best advertisement for it, but this is Spooktacular Crochet from Annie's Crafts. The link is in the show notes. If you want some quick, easy Halloween crafting, this would be a fun way to do it. Something I really like, well, of course, since I talked about using these, I gave you the link to the place on Amazon where you can buy 150 color-coded safety pin style stitch markers. I think it was about $6 on Amazon. And I bought these when I was pinning together Blanket's Own Blanket. Now you may remember that was 361 squares. So I did not have enough of these, but these made that immeasurably easier just by letting me lay it out and clip together rows in order and photograph everything and then sew together rows and keep moving clips. And I thought, well, I'm never going to use them again. I don't know if I need these things. Fortunately, I kept them. I have to tell you, having color-coded markers on something like amigurumi really makes the project easier. You just have to note down somewhere what color you're using for what section. So there they all are, and for $6, this is one of those better deals. I was reading a crochet site, and she was saying things she won't be buying in 2024. One of the things she said was, I will never again buy a marker for crochet that is not one of the safety pin clip types. Amen, my sister. Nothing much else going on. No real cooking this week. The boys did take me out today for sashimi, which was lovely. So there's not much to say in the blather except to say, yes, I am down 20 pounds now. My glucose and my ketosis levels look great. That's going very nicely. I seem to be on a slow burn, biking 35 minutes a day. I'm still only taking off about 2 pounds a week, and I'm happy about that. It's not exercise that makes you lose weight. It's diet and the speed of your metabolism. Well, nothing new in Project G or Project Cookbook. I'm still taking pictures of really good keto recipes and transferring those to recipe cards. The dogs are all doing fine. In the Green Fingers report, well, my husband went out with a weed whacker and started taking down the weeds because we have to. We're in a fire zone. And so among the survivors from last year's plantings, I told you last week I have dianthus. Well, we also have a rosemary bush, which I put in very late in the fall, and she's doing great. To our surprise today, my husband located 2 of my Russian sage plants. They don't look particularly spectacular, but that's okay. I just want them to grow. I just want them to take over the dianthus and the Russian sage. I want my perennials to come back. I had forgotten where I planted some things, but I didn't know if these were going to make it. I was really shocked to have the dianthus come back at all. It didn't look like it would. And the Russian sage has come back. So that's nice. I seem to have about 5 of my plants making it out in the front. So that's good. The whole point of last year was to plant things and find out what will grow here, because that's what I'm going to let take over here. So that's nice. Then underneath that, we have the community resources links, the books that I use with patterns, that is our knit and crochet library, and my favorite resources that I buy to support my knitting and crocheting, and then a list of links to my favorite skills and techniques. On the calendar, yours truly will be interviewed for Mental Health Month. This is from a local store over on the east side of LA called Hands On Knitting Center. And they have a Thursday lunch chat on Zoom. And so they are going to interview me, which I find interesting. And they wanted to do it live and let me take live questions, but I can't. I have patients at noon on Thursday. So we're going to do it May 30th at 11 a.m. And then they will record it and then play it on their Zoom spot. So if you want to go look at their webpage, you can see the link to it. That's the Hands On Knitting Center, HOKC. I don't have a link in the show notes. I'll see if I can find that. Meanwhile, our local Santa Clarita stitching groups are doing just fine. They're listed there if you're interested. And the SCV, the Santa Clarita Valley Free Craft Exchange, CFR 10 will be at the Courtyard by Marriott here in Valencia on September 28th, 2024, and there's yet another link there to the information thread. I have Romuel off, and that will be December 21st till at least, I believe, the 29th. And I don't know if I'm taking the 30th and 31st off. Minerva gets the last word. Minerva wants you to know that she is wishing you a happy Mother's Day, but you can see she is lying on the long counter in our big bathroom, staring at me as I am in the bathtub. That Minerva woke me up this morning to wish me happy Mother's Day when she figured I had slept enough at about 7 a.m. by putting her purring face in mine and talking to me and loving me. So she was my first Mother's Day greeting. And then she came and kept me company in the bath and talked to me the whole time about how much she loves me as her mom. I was kind of touched by this. Fortunately, the boys kept up, so at the top of the show notes, you will see my beautiful bouquets and their cards. And I got a lovely gift card to Amazon, which I used to buy a metal bottle that fits onto my soda stream so I can stop using plastic bottles to carbonate things. So I'm pretty happy about that. And then we all went out for sushi. Minerva, unfortunately, had to stay home, but she has been hanging out in my lap most of the day. The big gift that I got for Mother's Day was time. The boys just made sure I had a lot of time, and that's why I had so much crafting news in this episode. So it was a lovely Mother's Day. I started late. I didn't have my son till I was 45, and it taught me many things, one of which was it's a good thing I didn't have him in my 20s. I probably would have killed him. I didn't have the patience, but in my 40s, I kind of grew into the job, and it is the great joy of my life. The best decision I ever made was for us to become parents. So Minerva loves you all, and she wishes you all a happy Mother's Day, and she reminds you that your pets value you too as companions, if not parents. And on that note, let me say, remember, we are a community. We work better when we work for the good of the community. The individuals will be taken care of that way. So please take care of yourself in the name of your individual well-being, but also in the name of the community. Everybody stay safe, take care of each other, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye. So we have come to the end of another episode of Cognitive. Please do not use this podcast to diagnose yourself. If you think you are having a mental health problem, please contact a licensed mental health professional. Show notes for these episodes can be found at cognitivepodcast, all one word, .blogspot.com. Episodes can be found at iTunes under the name Cognitive Podcast, but also can be found posted next to the show notes on the Blogspot page. Thank you so much for listening. Everybody, stay safe, take care of each other, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.